Hi there. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from today. We're pleased to be with you and to talk about artificial intelligence and how to manage cyber and data governance risks. And as we get going today, we would appreciate any and all questions as we go through the content, and we'll talk about those at the end of the time together. So let's jump in and talk about who's here today joining me to speak. So first, my name is Mike Cullen, partner with Baker Tilly, focusing on all things IT, cyber, and data related risks. And I'm joined today by two great colleagues to talk about this, and I'll turn it over to Sam.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning. My name's Sam Boderman. I'm a senior manager in our IT risk advisory practice, and I'm one of our HITRUST practice leaders here at Baker Tilly. So excited to be here with you today talking about the presentation. I'll turn it over to Jeremy.
Hi, everyone. Jeremy Huval, Innovation Officer with HITRUST. I focus on IT audit and IT compliance and risk management stuff. And as of late, I've been leading the HITRUST AI initiative, which you'll hear a lot about. Excited to get into the conversation. So I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you, Sam and Jeremy. Well, let's talk about our agenda for today. So we want to talk through, AI adoption and benefits at a high level. We won't spend a lot of time here. I think there's a lot of other presentations that Baker Tilly has done and HITRUST has done that talks about some of the more detailed areas of adoption and benefits. We really want to focus today on the risks and the governance and how you can get your arms around that as your organizations tackle artificial intelligence in all of its various forms. Then Jeremy and Sam will talk a little bit more about HITRUST's AI Assurance Program and what they're rolling out. And then we'll talk about some next steps that everyone should take. And finally, we'll do, the Q&A. So again, please submit those questions in so we can address those at the end of our session today. So, one of the things that I think, AI really has shown us in the last 18 months, especially since OpenAI released their ChatGPT tool. And this whole concept of generative AI really has gone mainstream, is now there are tons of different systems and vendors and platforms that have popped up that can do a lot of stuff. And so one of the things is it can create music and songs. So, we did that for this to show you what's capable with literal seconds of work that Jeremy put into this. So we'll play a little snippet here.
When the clock strikes 12, the room is all prepared. Baker Tilly and HITRUST in the digital air. They're diving deep into the world of AI, breaking down the barriers, reaching for the sky.
Now, I don't know that that's going to win any Grammy Awards next year, but I think it illustrates that very quickly and easily these tools allow people to create lots of stuff, whether it's text, images, video, and with all that creation comes a lot of risk. And that's just on the generative AI side. So let's talk about AI explosion, right? How much it's going to impact business and organizations. So here's a few, charts and graphs from a few sources here to talk about what this is really going to look like. And I think everyone agrees that this is going to be more impactful as we go along than less. And so the question becomes not if AI will be used by your organization, it's when and how do you manage the risks associated with that. And so really, if you think about it, the ways that this is growing are really foundational items that have started years ago with things like cloud computing, the availability of data storage and the collection of data, and really then how we've been able to commercialize a lot of technology, especially in the last decade. And all of those factors really are setting the foundation for AI to continue to grow and in usage, in types, and we're only scratching the surface right now. And so really, what does that mean? Well, it means that AI is going to get integrated whether you like it or not, because of the way that all organizations rely on a certain set of vendors, software vendors, cloud vendors, third-party service vendors. You cannot escape. It's going to be very hard to escape AI because all of those different vendors and firms that your organization is partnering with, they are going to put AI into their products and services. And so it's going to come to your organization no matter where you are on the edge of adoption, whether you're at the bleeding edge or you're lagging behind. Some of that is going to be moot when vendors are already rolling things out. So, one of the great examples that probably many people are familiar with are both the Microsoft and Google suite of services and how AI is being pushed into more and more of their products and services every day. And so it's hard to escape that. If most organizations, you're using the Microsoft and or the Google suite for a lot of your email, your office applications, and a lot of basic tools that your organization uses. And so with those, we need to think about it's coming. How do we address that, right? Now, obviously, there are a lot of risks, but with risks, there is also a lot of opportunities. And I think as we see more capabilities and use cases for AI, we're going to be looking at ways to accelerate decision-making, increasing productivity, interacting with customers better and more frequently, and really being able to do a lot more advanced analytics with the data we have. And so that's really going to be able to enable your organization to really get a lot more value without, hopefully, a lot more effort. And so with that, those benefits, I think we're going to see folks looking at their cost structures, the number of people they use, right? I was listening to a podcast and they talked about, copywriting, that kind of job, right? Well, maybe your organization now has 2 copywriters. And if you need to grow, you thought, well, we needed to add 2 more. But now maybe you don't have to add any new copywriters. Instead, those copywriters can be equipped with AI tools that let them do the work of what would take now 4 people. They could do with just using the right tools to be able to be more efficient and productive. And so I think there's a lot of ways that that's going to help. Now, with that, though, as we talked about, there's going to be impacts. And particularly when we talk about generative AI, I think it's important to call that out because, traditional AI, machine learning has been around for, really in use by a lot of companies and organizations and vendors, for about a decade. Things that we all take for granted that are traditionally been built on AI machine learning models, like all of the various digital assistants on your phone and in your smart speakers. All of that's built on these concepts of machine learning. But as I mentioned, with OpenAI and ChatGPT really kicking off this generative AI revolution we've seen in the last 18 months, now we're looking at these large language models that can be used in a lot of different ways, whether it's creating the song that you heard at the beginning of the webinar, or it's writing down new content, or it's summarizing thousands of pages in seconds. There's a lot of various ways that Gen AI is really forcing, the technology to change and the risk landscape to change as well. And so as we think about this moving forward, right, I think it's important to remember this is very similar to how we saw the move from mainframe computers to more of the personal computers or server computers, and then even future now to the cloud computing, right? And so this is just another of those technology changes that's going to be impactful across every organization. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam, and she's going to talk a little bit about challenges and risks that we see, with AI today.
Thanks, Mike. So the use of AI in the market has really changed the threat landscape for a lot of organizations and brought about a new set of inherent risks that are really specific to AI platforms. And so while AI presents many opportunities for businesses to gain efficiencies that Mike had mentioned previously, It's really also introduced a unique set of risk and compliance challenges that truly demand attention as AI continues to grow and be leveraged for more and more business functionality. And so this is why we really cannot have, security and assurance considerations really be afterthoughts, right, in the generative AI kind of move that we're making. And organizations really need to start, right, managing risk and compliance of those systems and create kind of a unique set of controls that are going to address the unique set of risks that AI is really going to introduce into the control environment. And so as we think about Gen AI and risks related to that, there's a interesting survey that was released by McKinsey about the state of AI in 2023. And what this survey asked respondents to rate was on Gen AI related risk, and specifically what risks organizations consider to be relevant, first of all, and second, what risks are they working to mitigate? And so as we look at, right, the relevant risks that were toply rated as part of this, if we look at that top four, we see cybersecurity and regulatory compliance, right, really at the top there. And we see privacy standards, right, not too far below at number 6. And so as we think about risks relevant to generative AI, we can really see that cyber and regulatory, right, there's a lot of open questions on how are we going to ensure security and compliance when we're using these AI platforms. As we look to the right side of this graph here around risk mitigation, these are also highest scoring kind of in risks that organizations are working to mitigate currently. And where companies are really investing calories at this point to continue to get their arms around, how do we address kind of this changing landscape of risks that's being introduced, and how do we create a set of security controls around using these platforms? And so this survey really gives us a glimpse into where organizations are at today in relation to AI risks, which is really interesting and why we decided to kind of include it here. And so as we look at these risks, right, the questions always start to arise of, well, what a real life example look like of maybe how some of these could play out? And so let's take a look at a recent example that was in the news. So this is a real example that of a unique AI risk and really what could go wrong when we think about how we use AI in the business marketplace. And so really just a synopsis here of what happened is an organization was using chatbot for its customer service inquiries. And so as a customer was engaging with this AI chatbot, it kind of became, the customer was fed up and started asking or pressuring the chatbot to do silly things like swear at the customer, to create kind of a poem about how useless the company was that it was the chat box for. And so this is just one of many examples of unique risks that can happen when using AI technology. And right, a specific instance of how AI might not work to meet our business needs at times if we don't have the proper safeguards in place. And so, the question always comes up or arises that organizations might be asking themselves is, are AI-enabled systems really that different? And spoiler alert here, the answer is yes. They really are different than other technology. And right, as organizations are considering if they can apply the same set of information security controls to AI systems, right, we need to tailor that approach to address those specific risks. And so when we think about AI-enabled systems versus our traditional systems, right, traditional systems are built on logic that was developed, tested, reviewed by human experts. When we think about machine learning systems, how they are built is really totally different than our other legacy systems, right? That are traditional, right? Machine learning has the capability to learn as we provide it with data. It continues, right, to refine itself according to those data inputs and patterns that it's identifying, right? The data is really defining the logic here, right? Not the human experts. And so, this really provides us a strong foundation and base work of why we need to approach our AI systems, right, with a different lens in relation to cybersecurity and information security controls. So moving forward, here's the first polling question. Is your organization using AI for operational or customer-facing products? Answer A, yes, our company uses AI in a variety of ways throughout the org. B, yes, our company uses AI for a single purpose in our organization. No, our company isn't using AI, but maybe is considering it. Or D, maybe you're unsure if you're using it. So the polling question will open up, but we'll go ahead and continue on with the presentation. And I'm going to pass the ball here over to Mike.
All right, thanks, Sam. So obviously, Sam covered a lot of different risk areas, and then you could drill down into those risks in very specific use case risks, very specific types of cyber privacy, ethical risks, right? We don't have time in this presentation to go through every single one of those and what those might look like. I think the key aspect, though, is they are going to be different for every organization and every use case for AI. There's levels of risk and levels of control that you'll want to apply that make sense for your organization. But to do that, you've got to have an overarching AI governance method, framework, way of approaching it, instead of trying to do it one by one or as things pop up. And while that may be fine today, in the first few times you're rolling out AI models and AI platforms, as your organization grows, as more of these tools and platforms are being used, you cannot continue to do it in an ad hoc, one-off manner. So you need to think about, how does our organization going to govern this? And as Sam just said, you can't just rely on the traditional ways of thinking about it because of some of the unique nature and aspects of the technology itself and how that technology plays out in the use cases at your organization. So AI governance, really, right, it's how do we think about the deployment and development first of these tools, and then how we're going to use them. And it incorporates the policies, potential laws, third-party frameworks, and any regulations, and putting that all together in a way that develops for your organization something that is going to enable the use of AI or restrict it, depending on the risk and your risk tolerance, but also in a way that's going to make it so that you can use these tools in a robust manner that's transparent, that has accountability, potential safety, and manages all of those various risks that we've highlighted. And so what might this look like really depends a lot on the organization, your structure, and there's, again, many variables and permutations you could take to figure out what AI governance might look like for your organization. So we wanted to highlight just a few kind of key concepts on how you might establish that as a starting point. And then as you do that, how does it then be adopted into your organization to meet your needs? So let's think about this first and foremost. So, right, we need to have some roles and responsibilities around AI governance. We are seeing most organizations adopt this through a committee, a working group, bringing together the right stakeholders with expertise across the organization. This is not a one-person show where you can hire this and have one person run and do the AI governance all by themselves, right? There's too many facets to this. There's a technology facet, right, that definitely would probably fall into your CIO traditionally, right? But there's also various legal and regulatory issues that brings in compliance and general counsel. There's obviously data risks and security risks that brings in your security officer or CISO. Then you talk about all the use cases to actually deploying this for your customers, your constituents, your stakeholders. And so there's various business and operational personnel that need to be involved. Because again, it's not something that one person is going to be able to solve on their own. And there's different aspects of governance that will need to be handled by different people based on their expertise. And so once you've pulled that initial group together, that may not be the group that you end up with 12 months from now. That might just be your initial group to get started. And to being flexible is also a key aspect of all of this, because things are going to change and we've got to be able to adapt and adopt things quickly without being stuck in a rigid structure. But the second thing is we need some policies, some guidelines, some practices that really we are going to put in place. We've seen a number of organizations publish some AI principles on their website publicly for their customers and their constituents to see. A lot of this has happened in the media landscape. So a lot of large media companies have put these out there to help with some of the risks around, the potential for dis or misinformation. And so they're telling you when you see a website, one of their websites and an article or content there, they want you to know what was created with AI and what wasn't, and they want to be very clear and transparent. As we're starting to see more regulations come, some of these regulations that are in draft form and some of the ones that are going to be here adopted soon, they have some requirements around being able to publish that on a public website, to be able to share that information with your customers. And so I think about a lot of organizations many years ago adopted privacy policies on their websites, right? So at the bottom of the website, there's a little link, you click it, says what your privacy policy is. A lot of folks are looking at this as a way to have either privacy and AI together, or a separate AI principles link there on the website to be able to say, here's how we're thinking about it. Then thinking about, let's put together a process for decision making. We've seen a couple different things in this model or to address this. One is the model which you give some overarching guidelines and you let people be entrepreneurial in the organization and hopefully follow the guidelines and do the right thing. And then we've seen other organizations take a very strict model of only using AI tools that are approved through a very rigorous process. And again, that's going to depend on your organization and the type of decision you're going to make. Sam brought up the chatbot, example. That's still very much a lower risk item versus things like making decisions around insurance claims. So, for example, the state of Colorado has new regulations around using AI for those kind of automated decision-making processes. And so you'll see more of that coming with more regulations focused on making sure there's a human in the loop for those decisions, and especially high-risk decisions that have impact on individual people. And then finally, let's do some assessments, and we'll talk about some of the frameworks here in a minute, but you've got to assess things, look at your results, and then make changes, because this is going to change and adapt to the different models of AI, the different platforms and different systems. And so really there's kind of two main kind of AI risk management frameworks out there. NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, has published an AI risk management framework, or the RMF. It's out there, free to use. You can go download it. It's got a lot of good information. But again, this is a risk management framework, so it's not going to have all the specific details of the controls or processes you need to have in place. Instead, it's going to be helpful to putting into place the right governance around the risks and managing those. There's also an equivalent standard from ISO around AI risk management. Obviously, ISO standards, those you have to pay for, so that is one of the differences. But the ISO standards, definitely support ISO certifications, and so that might be appropriate for your organization depending on, other certifications and ISO standards you may use. And then the other place to look is really around very specific guidance that's coming out. And this slide talks about, in the United States, very specific US federal agencies and what they're publishing out there. The US does not have an overarching AI law or regulation or a privacy overarching law or regulation, but there are pockets of different regulations out there and different sectors that could be regulated by these various agencies. And then finally, not on the slide, but I'll just point out that the biggest impact from a global regulatory AI scheme is that the European Union is in the process of adopting what they call the AI Act that has a lot of requirements. That'll go into effect here, start to go into effect in a few months. So that will be coming and will impact organizations across the globe because, again, how they're defining the use of AI within the European Union. And so obviously, if you're have customers there, if you have technology that you deploy and sell in the EU, that AI Act is going to impact you in certain ways. All right, let's talk about the second polling question here. So why is the AI governance critical to the assurance and compliance landscape? Again, there's no right answer. You can answer any of the items here to get CPE credit. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy and Sam, and they're going to go through the HITRUST AI Assurance Program. So HITRUST has developed a way to think about AI assurance and managing the governance and risk as a potential model that organizations could use to get their arms around AI.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So happy to talk about the HITRUST AI Assurance Program. And this is something that HITRUST as an organization embarked on over a year ago, where we started looking at different levels of adoption in AI in our customer base. And for those not familiar with HITRUST, we focus on enabling trust and information supply chains. We're really heavily used in the third-party risk management context to communicate assurances over security and privacy and risk management from third parties that you're sharing critical and sensitive data with. So our AI assurance program is an extension of our assurance program, by which we issue certifications and meaningful assurance reports that I mentioned. And what we're focusing on here on the AI assurance piece is unlocking ways to deliver really practical and scalable assurance around AI security, first and foremost, but also AI risk management in the form of certifications and reports. If you think about the world of sort of responsible AI, which I think is the term that's normalizing, and I say that because for a while there was this, as I saw it, competition for trustworthy AI versus like a safe and responsible AI versus just responsible AI. So I think it's normalizing on responsible AI, and I hope this recording stands the test of the time and that stays true. But we're focusing on this assurance program right now on the subset of responsible AI that is security and risk management. Mike mentioned a few of the other sort of broader goals for responsible AI: inclusiveness and fairness and respect for human life and safety. Here we're focusing on security and risk management. And so through this program, we want to help organizations shape their AI risk management efforts, understanding best practices around AI and security, AI security and AI governance, and really have a effective, scalable way to perform assessments and validations of AI controls and achieve demonstrable, communicable reports and certifications that you can share with internal and external stakeholders to really show that you are doing what needs to be done here to use AI responsibly and with diligence. Mike, next slide. And I realize my video is not coming through. I apologize for that. Let me toggle it one more time and see if this fixes it at all. No, I apologize for my video. I'm not sure what's going on. So our AI assurance program really has 5 components. The first component is industry collaboration. We're also focusing on harmonizing AI resources and AI standards. I'll talk more about each of these. There's a part of it that's focusing on developing the thinking on shared AI responsibilities. I mentioned the AI security certification. And we're also doing a lot of work around AI risk management reporting. So let's talk about the first one. Mike, if you can advance the slide, please. And let's talk about what we're doing on industry collaboration. So for a while now, HITRUST has had a working group consisting of several big cloud providers, as well as what I'm calling AI early adopters, or organizations who have really leaned into AI technologies in their organizations. So it includes Microsoft, J&J, OptumUHG, Cloudticity, Databricks, and a few others. We get together every other week and we try to tackle challenges around how do we get this goal of AI assurances at scale figured out. So we identify sort of what solutions and offerings are really needed in the space overall, and how can the HITRUST machinery of AI assurance and cybersecurity assurance at scale be adjusted to meet that need. So we're answering questions like, which cybersecurity controls would an organization need to have if they were only using like platform as a service, OpenAI, versus how much extra and different controls would an organization need if they were training their own models using like predictive AI and everything was on-prem, and like what risk profiles exist in this space, and what's the right level of controls within each risk profile. Questions like that we're working to answer. So that's one working group we've got going on, and we will continue to meet in that working group, I think, through the end of this year at minimum. We've also got a second working group consisting of external assessors. Those are the professional services firms who perform our validation and verification work leading to certification. And there's a member of the Baker Tilly team, Emily, who's in that working group. And there we're trying to answer the question very specifically: what levels of competence and experience and qualifications does a verification and validation team need to assess an AI system competently and appropriately? So like, what do the qualifications look like? Do you need a data scientist? Do you need someone with a certain degree or a certain qualification? And so these are just a few of the examples of the industry collaboration that's really helping shape our thinking and will ultimately shape our deliverables here. Next slide, Mike. Also, we're doing a great deal of work on what I'm calling harmonizing AI resources. And so in our world, the HITRUST world, we call them authoritative sources, but these are the externally developed standards, frameworks, guidelines, regulations, or laws. We call those authoritative sources. And right now in our harmonized framework, which we call the HITRUST CSF, we've got over 4 dozen authoritative sources, many ISO standards, many NIST special publications, many laws like HIPAA, GDPR, and even state level stuff like CCPA. We incorporate it into one great big harmonized or omni framework. And by doing so, that allows organizations who adopt the HITRUST CSF to really focus on the implementation of these things, as opposed to chopping through all the fine print themselves and trying to keep up with all the updates to these documents themselves. And this work we do is a service to the industry. It's a free download. It could be accessed from that QR code right there on our website. So we've been adding since, I think, October last year, different AI-focused authoritative sources. So for example, we've incorporated the 2 AI risk management documents that were discussed earlier, the NIST AI RMF and ISO 23894. And in 11.3 that's about to come out, we've got even more. And so we're going to continue to add authoritative sources around AI risk and security and potentially AI privacy as that area gets built out, to have a collection of the right, well-worded, really prescriptive controls and guidance around how to implement an AI governance area of the business. Next slide, please. So when I say harmonization, really it comes down to what we're parsing through and what we're incorporating. So on this slide, I've got just a few, maybe the most impactful, the most newsworthy, I guess, authoritative sources around AI security, privacy, and risk management, in my opinion, that have come out so far. And so the EU AI Act was mentioned. I think no other authoritative source has gotten so much coverage, at least from where I'm sitting. The AI Act is a very big deal. MITRE, for those familiar with MITRE through their work around the MITRE ATT&CK framework or MITRE Defend, MITRE is a US funded organization, US government funded organization who does really good work in the cybersecurity space. And they've also published this adversarial threat landscape kind of document. It's got a bunch of threats and mitigations around AI. And we're currently mapping in the AI mitigations found in MITRE. The White House has the AI Bill of Rights, and there's just a bunch in here. I've been really impressed with what OWASP has been doing. Those of you might remember OWASP from, they've got like a top 10 for web application security and other things. So OWASP is doing really good work around large language model security and machine learning security. NIST obviously has a few that they published, and they're continuing to work on more. ISO is doing really good work. Most recently, ISO came out with 42001, which is an AI management system standard, not security, not privacy, not risk management, but truly an AI management system. So I think it's a very good document. And there's a few others on here. And so on the next slide, you can see the work that HITRUST is doing to incorporate the content from each of these documents, or many of these documents, into our harmonized framework. And in purple font on this slide, I've reflected the versions of our framework that content will be included. And so 11.2 already came out in October of last year. 11.3 is going to come out in like 2 weeks, I think, from the date of this recording. And 11.4 is coming out later this year, 2024. And so we're really excited to be incorporating all these for the benefit of organizations who look to the HITRUST CSF as the source of guidance, as the sort of master list of controls and to-do items that are necessary to address certain risks in their environment. And on the next slide, the other very important component of our AI assurance program is AI shared responsibilities. And Sam, if you can talk about this one.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So moving on into AI shared responsibilities, component 3 of the HITRUST AI Assurance Program really kind of goes through how do we develop our shared responsibility model specific to AI. And so really the shared responsibility model is a working framework that's followed by service providers that's really going to go through and detail responsibilities over an environment and how those responsibilities should be divided between the service provider and the user organization. And so the HITRUST AI Assurance Program is going to leverage kind of shared responsibilities and their inheritance program to really work to determine how organizations should assess and manage AI shared responsibilities, to enable inheritance of AI platform testing results from those AI model providers for customers to leverage. If you're not familiar with the HITRUST CSF framework, something that's unique about it is that you're able to actually inherit the control testing and control results from, I would say, definitely all of the major cloud service providers and a number of other number of other service providers as well. So being able to inherit the testing, the results of that testing to kind of impact how it's going to look at your organization is a major plus of using the HITRUST AI Assurance Program. And then it'll also kind of enable inheritance of those results. And this is scheduled to be released in Q4 of 2024. So Jeremy mentioned previously some of the different frameworks and releases, but this is a feature that's going to be incorporated as part of that AI assurance program, that if you're doing the HITRUST CSF now, you may already be using this feature. And so, what does an AI shared responsibility model really look like, right? How do we visualize that? And so what we've included on this slide is an example that has been somewhat recently released by Microsoft that really outlines, right, the different categories that they have here: AI usage, AI application, AI platform, as well as the different usage models that each of our user organizations could have. And so, right, the majority of our AI platforms are leveraging cloud services, and the responsibilities for the AI control performance is really going to vary, right, depending on the type of AI cloud usage model that your organization is subscribed to, right? Mike and Jeremy mentioned this previously. There's kind of an entire spectrum of what a user org can subscribe to, right? And so the usage model is going to really determine the control ownership responsibilities between the service org and your user organization. And so this really gives us kind of a really nice just snippet or insight into, right, depending on that usage level, right, what that shared responsibility matrix might look like and how it might differ. A question that comes up as we think about shared responsibilities with clients, right, it's really easy to delineate for ones that are owned by the service provider and the customer what we need. But for those shared responsibilities, how do we determine, right, what we really need to provide? And so what we always recommend is working with your auditor and your cloud team to determine, what those requirements are going to be so that you can make sure for your portion of that shared responsibility that you have adequate documentation to substantiate that.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So hopefully including that graphic is a little helpful to kind of bring home this concept that just like operating in the cloud and shared responsibilities became so important, operating in cloud with AI also has that shared responsibility consideration. So yeah, this slide currently that we're looking at is yet another really important component of our program. And a lot of what we've talked about so far in the AI assurance program is building up to this offering, this AI security certification. We acknowledge that more and more there are product pitches happening where it just seems like AI is being incorporated into every system. I was just at HIMSS, a big healthcare conference, and every booth had AI this or AI that. It's like the magic fairy dust almost of a product to get actually better attention, hopefully sell more of it. But every time I hear that, I think, all right, well, it's great that you put AI into your program, into your product, and you've got better functionality. But what are you doing, vendor, to address those kind of specificities that get, like the special risks that get brought in through the use of AI? And how mature is your AI governance inside your house that's driving this program? And are you really addressing all the risks you should be or not? And so this AI cybersecurity certification can be used to answer questions like that, just like so many cybersecurity certifications exist right now and are really commonplace in the TPRM side today. We envision AI assurances being as necessary as organizations bake in generative or predictive AI or different types of AI into their product. And so we're building toward truly a cybersecurity certification that can be bolted on to a HITRUST security assessment and can be used for internal and external stakeholders to really communicate, hey, you know what, there's risks here and we are addressing those risks. It could be for a board communication as well as like to your current and prospective customers or different risk management functions within your organization. We are working to expand our entire assessment and certification portfolio. So historically, you've only been able to add different subject matter to an R2 certification. We're also working to make our E1 and I1 assessments tailorable to include AI security content as well. And then also, AI risk management reporting is something we acknowledge is very key. And we acknowledge that many organizations are either considering or have just adopted some form of AI and are working on figuring out this question of how do I need to adjust my current risk management practices to address AI? And so we mentioned a few of those sources. I've got them listed here toward the bottom that more and more companies are looking to answer this question of like, what does right look like by way of AI risk management? Well, if you follow that guidance and you feel like you've got it really good, there's really no way to like produce certification reports or any kind of like deliverables other than something you might build for yourself to communicate that, yeah, like I think we've got this AI risk management thing pretty well mature by now, or hey, based on the investment we just made in extending and expanding our AI risk management practices, I think we've got it more mature than we had it last week or last year. So we're working toward having a deliverable that can be bolted onto a HITRUST assessment that really speaks just to this question. How is your AI risk management program going? Where are the gaps? Where are the areas that you need to continue to mature and bake out? And this can be achieved by adding an AI risk management factor into your HITRUST assessment, and it adds about 50 AI risk management focus requirements. They're worded like controls. And if you do that and include that in the HITRUST assessment, you can tack on this new deliverable, this report, And it's got a lot of moving parts, but one of the things in it that people really like is the scorecard view against both NIST AI Risk Management Framework and ISO 23894 of where the gaps in your AI risk management program. And so, Sam, you want to take us through on the next slide? Okay. I have trouble with Sam's audio. I'll speak to this one. So just to kind of round out the discussion on the HITRUST AI Assurance Program, this set of view is kind of what we're working towards. So you'd start with a core of really threat adaptive controls, and that can be an R2, E1, or I1 HITRUST assessment, and that's supported by all the shared responsibility model work that we're doing around AI and cloud. And organizations can optionally include an AI risk management factor or source, and can optionally include AI and ML security controls. And depending on how you configure your assessment, you can get one of many reports issued from HITRUST, be it a certification report focusing just on cybersecurity, that's your traditional E1, I1, R2, or you could also get an accompanying HITRUST AI security certification or an accompanying HITRUST AI risk management insight report. And on the next slide, Mike, I think we've got a polling question. Yeah, so polling question number 3, which framework, if any, is your organization using today to manage risks and threats around AI-enabled systems? Maybe you're already using the HITRUST CSF on option A. Maybe you're using one of the ISO IAC standards, or maybe a NIST special publication. Maybe something else we haven't talked about. Or D, either you're not using AI or just not sure, or you aren't yet using a framework to manage your AI risks and threats.
Thanks, Jeremy, for covering that slide for me. I don't know, I had a computer issue with my mouse here and was unable to come off of mute, so thank you.
All right. So as you guys answer that polling question on the webinar, let's talk about next steps. What can you do right now to take the next steps for AI governance and risk management? Now, again, there's a lot of specificity that comes with what next steps your organization should take based on a lot of different things we've talked about today. And so these are some high-level potential actions, right? Individual organizations will have different needs based on the specific use cases as we talked about. And I keep harping on that use case because it's so different depending on what you're trying to accomplish with AI, right? If I think about organizations that are trying to automate decision-making and have AI recommend a decision that used to be made by humans, or after humans did a lot of intermediate steps, that's probably a lot higher risk for your organization, and a lot more scrutiny and risk management and governance is needed for that, versus we want to take our call center, add some AI capabilities so we can be more responsive to customers, at least to triage the basics. And I think that's something where, again, that use case is different and how you might interact with customers. And then even less than that, if you've got marketing folks that want to create AI-generated graphics for presentations or for your website, that's probably even a lower risk than the automated decision-making. And so thinking through all those risks is really important, because the governance framework needs to be flexible to adapt to that. So first, as Jeremy mentioned, these are still tools, there's still technology, so there's still cyber and data protections that need to be put into place. And so that's never going to change. But then you've got to look at all these vendors you're using and understand what they are doing today with AI and how that might change your existing contracts, service level agreements, and or licenses that you have to use those products and services. And that's an important thing, because as I mentioned earlier, right, that's where things are going to be added, especially to cloud systems, without, checking with every single customer, right? They are going to make these things available. Probably if they do it responsibly, it'll be an opt-in at the start, but eventually there won't be an opt-in or opt-out, right? It'll come the AI capabilities will just come with these tools. Now, if you're going to incorporate them into your customer-facing products, right, again, as we talked about, customers are going to start to ask, well, what are you doing? How are you using AI? And being transparent with that is important. So how are you going to address that in a way that you are providing the right level of information to your customers and constituents, but without, making promises or guaranteeing things when it comes to AI, especially when there's still so much that we don't know about how some of these models work. Because as Sam talked about, it's not the same traditional logic that you would have in a legacy platform, right? There is the models themselves in AI are making decisions and using information. And in some cases, it's a black box that we don't really understand. You definitely need to inventory everything. And this sounds like a very basic thing and it sounds very straightforward, but it could be very hard, especially because AI is a broad concept. So we talked about earlier about machine learning versus generative AI. And so there's different AI that is going to be deployed in your products, in your services, by your vendors, by the partner organizations you work with. And so you need to understand which types of AI models are used and what type of AI is used, because they all have different risk profiles. And then finally, we talked about a number of different sources out there as things you can use from NIST and ISO and OWASP and other sources of information to really understand what the guidance is at this time and stay in tune with that, because it will change. It'll change as we move through and we learn more about different types of generative AI, different types of future AI models and tool sets that are out there. And so again, making sure you've got that tuned in to the right people so they can make decisions appropriately. And then finally, as we talked about, it's really, as you're putting this all together, making sure you've got all the right people. And again, I think it's important to say, because you need to have all the right folks at the organization involved, because if you don't, you could miss something. And as we've seen in some of the examples we've talked about, there's already been a lot of information in the news about AI gone wrong. And I think we'll see more and more of that. And so the more people that you've got that have the right expertise that you can bring together at your organization, I think the better your organization will be at addressing these things. And yes, things might happen, mistakes are made, but the more folks involved, I think you'd be able to manage that risk a little better in the long run. So before we jump to the Q&A, let's do the last polling question here. Would you like to be contacted by the presenters to further discuss cyber and data risks related to AI? And then as you're answering that, we've also got a number of different resources that are available to download. And you can see the QR codes here. Lots of information but from Baker Tilly and HITRUST on how to start tackling AI. I'll leave that up while we jump into some questions. I think the first question that I think will go to Jeremy. Do you think the control considerations around AI, like the technical ones, are really the focus, or are there administrative kind of controls to consider as well?
Yeah, great question. If I think about all the controls I need to really address the risk of AI, it's going to be a mix of the technical controls that can be configurable as sort of switches or like access limitations and whatnot. A mix of those with the more administrative controls, like I need roles and responsibilities clearly defined. I need written policies and procedures. I need training to my teams. So it's really a mix of your administrative and technical, which I think is consistent with kind of how other IT risks are addressed, where it takes both.
Yeah, I agree with that. Another question we got in is, who should own AI governance within an organization? Should there be a chief AI officer needed? And should we create that? And I think this is another area where things are developing in such a unique way that it really is going to depend on the organization. I've seen different organizations take different approaches here. Organizations have the chief legal counsel kind of being in charge of this. I've got another organization I've worked with that the CIO is taking the lead. So I think it really is going to depend on your organization. But even if you, again, have that person that's kind of designated to lead, they can't do it by themselves. You're still going to need to bring together the right people to do that. Jeremy, we got a number of questions around some of the specifics of the HITRUST AI program, related to the different controls and questions and what happens if there's, maybe conflicts or disagreements between some of those authoritative sources.
Yep.
How are those things handled?
Yeah, so it's not unusual when we harmonize different authoritative sources to have different degrees of rigor or specificity in the control performance. Like, I don't know, just as an example, one source might say, hey, you need to train your people every year on phishing. And another source might say, oh, that's 6 months, every 6 months. So how do we overcome those kind of conflicts? Do we just do the low watermark, or do we blend it? And our framework is tailorable using our assessment software to where if you want to include a more aggressive source, you have the ability to add that source in. And if you add 2 different sources, usually there's a normalized requirement that has different specificity that'll indicate the source. And so it's almost a science at this point, because we've got a team of really sharp people doing harmonization all day long, and I could bore everyone on the call with the details. It's very fine print, but we do work to not lose any specificity where specificity is required by an authoritative source, especially when it's like a law. We can't just arbitrarily drop asks or details. So we've got to have a way to make sure that those are preserved. And I think another question came through about sort of just configuring a HITRUST assessment. Will those AI security controls we talked about, are they included in every HITRUST assessment, or do you have to go out of your way to sort of add AI as an optional factor when you configure your HITRUST assessment? And it's the latter. One of the things about our framework as well is it's sort of tailored to your risks in your environment. So if you don't have wireless, you're not going to get any wireless controls. And if you don't have any AI, you don't have to indicate that you've got AI, and therefore you wouldn't get any AI specific controls either. Great question.
Yeah, I think the last question we'll address, and if we didn't address your question, we'll follow up with you if you provided your name and contact information. There was a lot of questions about what do I learn more? There are more sources for information about AI governance, AI risks. I think this is another area that is developing, right? There are certification programs that are done by certain universities. I know that certain professional organizations like the International Association of Privacy Professionals is developing an AI governance certification. Obviously, HITRUST has certifications related to being a HITRUST professional. So I think, again, a lot to look at and learn there. I think it's looking at different options. I think the biggest takeaway I have from my looking and research at these different programs is you need to think about it holistically, right? As Jeremy said, it's not just the technical controls, right? It's also not just a policy and procedural type thing. It's holistic around the technology, the processes, the use cases, the business case. How do you bring all that together? And so again, it's going to take a lot for a course or any one particular education program to address those. So it may need to be a combination of different programs and information sources. But again, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate all of you spending some time to learn more about AI governance, risk, and controls around cyber and data. Our contact information is here. We are always open to having more conversations and clarifying and addressing any AI questions you may have. And so with that, thank you all for joining us today, and have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.